So there are protests and clashes going on in Iran at the moment. These protests were supposedly sparked off by rising prices and unemployment, but they've definitely taken on an anti-clerical dimension, with protesters shouting things like, "We are Aryans, we do not worship the Arab god." And by that I presume they're referring to their pre-Islamic, pagan Persian heritage. Anyway, it's been cracked down on hard as you might expect, but also as you might expect, the usual warhawks are licking their lips in anticipation. Now, obviously the Iranian theocracy is garbage, and we should be glad to see it go so long as it's replaced with something better, but the track record of this sort of thing doesn't look good. We could say that there's a great and nascent liberalism hiding in the Iranian people, and that if the theocracy goes, there's a much greater chance of a westernised regime replacing it than there ever even remotely was in places like Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya and Syria, sure. However, even if that is true, if the West were to intervene, it would simply lead to a massive propaganda coup by the regime, which is already blaming foreign powers for the protests. The Middle East is never going to westernise by foreign fiat, sorry. What the Middle East needs is for its people to educate themselves on what they're missing out on, and for liberalism to slowly spread among intellectuals. This is something that the internet certainly speeds along, which is why they're cracking down on it. The Middle Eastern liberals need their own revolution. But until we can see proof that the Middle East can produce liberal societies, minus Israel, we should remain wary that what replaces the strongmen and theocrats isn't going to be something worse. We'd already learned that lesson, you'd think. This is not once bitten, twice shy, but more 5 times bitten, inexplicably not shy at all. There's a reason Iran wants a nuclear deterrent. It's really hard when there's a humanitarian crisis to not want to rush to the rescue, but international events are complex and can't be boiled down to the kind of moral analogies that make sense when dealing with a small number of people. We can't just go in and beat up the bully and save the girl. Have we gathered enough information on Iran? Can we say foreign fighters won't flood in, as was the case in Syria? We can see a bully, but do we know what other bullies are waiting in the wings? There are some differences here in that in the Iraqi, Libyan and Syrian cases we had semi-secular and soft theocratic strongmen holding down what were mostly theocratic radicals, whereas here we have a theocrat holding down an opposition with greater liberal potential, or so the story goes. So it certainly does look better, but we can't afford not to be wary and pessimistic here after everything that's happened. Also, if we were to say, hey, let's topple Iran, on the same basis there's an even better humanitarian argument for toppling Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is an even more repressive theocracy than Iran, and since it's a Sunni theocracy rather than a Shiite theocracy, it has been funding worldwide Islamic supremacist sects that support a caliphate. There's a direct link between the Saudis and Al-Qaeda, which in turn grew a tumour that split off and became ISIS. Saudi Arabia funds radical mosques in Europe, so it's a menace beyond its borders, beyond the region. There's a much better case for toppling Saudi Arabia, and yet the country is a Western ally. Oil and frozen Cold War geopolitics, I guess. I don't know how messy and brutal it's going to get in Iran, but I don't think the West is even remotely equipped to fix the situation. My heart of hearts wishes that Khomeini and friends get the noose, and it's the same across the Middle East, and all these colour revolutions result in liberal democracies, but the only way that can happen is for the population of the Middle East to decide that such a thing is a good idea. Until they do, every effort to force the situation will fail. Let's watch this one from afar and see how it turns out. If the regime falls and is replaced with something better and a shock result, maybe we can finally say that we've seen a turnaround in at least one place in the Middle East. Until we have even one example of that, after time and time again seeing the fall of regimes end in the empowerment of even more savage elements, then perhaps finally we can feel confident intervening in the Middle East on behalf of a populace that genuinely wants liberalism and westernisation. That's all I have to say about that for the moment, but I'll try and keep up to date with any changes in the situation that might change my opinion, but that's how I feel right now.